Welcome to Insight. I'm Wendy Brokaw. What do Oregonians who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing need in order to connect freely with mainstream society? The key is bridges and building them, and most important, sustaining them. And it's working. Bridges Oregon is a unique statewide nonprofit created by, of, with, and for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community. And in 2021, it became the first and only culturally specific and responsive nonprofit organization to provide advocacy and accompaniment services to individuals who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing victims and survivors in their heritage languages. There are successes and some setbacks. As it says on their website, too many barriers, not enough bridges. So what's working and what needs to be done? Well, here with us today is Chad Ludwig, its founder and executive director, and his interpreters from A5 Interpreting Services. Welcome back, Chad. Awfully good to see you. And it has been, in every sense, a very eventful year, and you have some important news to share.
Yes, I do. Thank you for having me here. And this organization is now on our 5th fiscal year, and we are operating on probably a $3 million budget with 18 full-time employees. And we are continuing to search for different grants. Some grants have fallen through due to a variety of issues that have come up that have caused us to lose some funding.
Well, in 2023, after years of lobbying with the state legislature, they did do some funding for you. What was it?
Yes. So during the 2023 legislative session, what they did is that they wrote in some one-time funding to provide case management services. And that was allocated to the Oregon Department of Human Services in 2023. They received that funding, but then they didn't post the grant information until later. So once it was available, then we applied, and we were awarded some funds a half year later. And we got that funding in November of 2024, so about a year and a half later. So we had from July 1st, 2023 until this point in 2025, so 8 months altogether for which to provide case management services. And that was really difficult for us to essentially establish this new line of services and then shut it back down over an 8-month period. We already knew that there was a huge need for it, and we were able to start to do a little bit of it, but we were not able to gather the data to be able to implement that service more permanently as something we could provide to the Oregon deaf community.
What kind of case management are we talking about?
Yeah, so the case management services, there are some areas where we are allowed to work with, for instance, parents, families, and children. There are ways to work with incarcerated individuals and help them transition back into the community. Some legal issues, some medical barriers that we need to break down so folks have access to medical care. So there's a wide variety of services that can be within that, some related to employment and many more. And essentially it's any unmet need that we identify in the community that those case management services could help us to address them. So there's really a wide range of unmet needs and gaps in this community, and we were able to sort of touch on each of those, but over a very short amount of time. So we didn't have enough time to make substantial change.
Is there anything in the works with the state legislature to go back again and revisit this with them, the funding?
Yes, we tried that during the 2025 session because in 2023 they made it clear that this was just one-time funding. So obviously we knew that we needed to push for another source of funding and have some kind of ongoing opportunity. So just recently in 2025, I worked very hard with the legislature and with representatives to try to push this. And the legislature received close to $5 billion worth of requests. And they only have about $1 billion to give out. So, you know, that's only 20% that they had available, and we ended up falling into that 80% category who did not receive the funding. So there was not enough funding to keep it going, and we know that the legislature could not give out everything, and they had to make some hard decisions because they just didn't have the funding to support everyone. So we missed out on having that ongoing opportunity in 2025. I'm hoping to go back in 2027, but the game plan has become a bit more difficult with all of the budget cuts that have significantly impacted Oregon, especially those from the federal government. So I really don't know what it's going to look like when we get to that 2027 legislative session.
Can you give me some numbers of how big a problem deaf-blind, hard of hearing is in Oregon?
Well, we are here and available to provide services to 1 in 4 Oregonians who are living with a wide range of hearing losses. In the state, we have over 4 million people living here, just as the population of the state. And the research shows that 1 in 4 people have hearing difficulties. So that would mean that about 1 million Oregonians have hearing difficulties, which is why we're here. We're here to support that community. And that goes from anyone from mild hearing loss, who's hard of hearing, to people who are profoundly deaf. And that whole community is within the realm of who we serve. Now, there's so many gaps within that community, and we're able to cover some with the programs that we have now. And we did have to recently close a program, which then reduces the number of people we can serve and the number of gaps that we can fill. But we do have a couple hundred individuals who we can still serve, but we'd like to be serving a lot more.
You have a successful program, 24/7 calls.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How is that going?
Yeah, we have a 24/7 emergency hotline that specifically gives the opportunity to deaf and hard of hearing folks who are experiencing violence to have somewhere to reach out to, whether it's domestic or sexual violence, dating or intimate partner violence, stalking. The hotline is designed to support those individuals experiencing those particular issues. We do get calls once in a while, and people do express a need for those services. We have advocates who are available 24 hours. So whenever an emergency situation comes up, we have an advocate who can respond.
Advocacy, that's interesting. You have advocacy services, and that tells me they need them in a wide variety of areas.
Yeah. So we have employment and independent living services, and we have some other things that we do that are sort of unwritten support systems within there to help people get jobs. That includes advocacy and educating employers to convince individuals that we have these deaf people who are good workers. You know, they can be the best employees, and we want to place them out there in these positions and allow them to have successful and sustainable employment. We also have domestic violence and sexual assault services, for which we provide advocacy services. And we also work closely with various vendors and stakeholders and community groups, where when they feel the need for advocacy, we can provide consultation and some advocacy as well, and that is within our capacity.
Is it growing?
Yes. Yeah, we have 18 employees, and I think we probably need a 3 times larger team to be able to do all of that. There's just so many needs out there.
What kind of impact do you think you're having since you started this?
Well, since we were founded, and after that first funding that we received in 2021 until now, I would say that we have been able to place a number of people from the street into permanent housing, help them get back on their feet after experiencing violence in the home, and then they're able to be self-sufficient and independent. You know, we have placed people into jobs, we've given them independent living training. We have also brought awareness to how to be financially independent and help them understand their roles as employees, so they know that, okay, when I have a job, I need to be on time and that kind of thing. So we have really built confidence and autonomy in a lot of folks and given them a sense of belonging. And I believe that a lot of them feel much more secure with themselves now, which is something that's very important to us.
What are you hearing from the community about this role of Bridges Oregon, bringing down barriers and enabling understanding and communication? What are you hearing from the community?
Yeah, the community often expresses their gratitude, and at the same time they also express some disappointment that there aren't sufficient resources still. For instance, sometimes there's one particular person who reached out recently, it's a state employee, who wanted to know if there were specific group homes in the state who could take in a deaf individual with very specific needs. And as we looked around at the resources out there, there really wasn't anything that fit that situation. Another contact we received was from a family who wanted some parenting training with a curriculum that was specifically designed for a deaf family. And that didn't exist anywhere. So there are a lot of little things like that for which there is no resource available.
Parenting classes, that sounds wonderful. All of these things, these aren't things that people in the mainstream society are focused on, and I can see where there's a role that you could play in facilitating that understanding.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. So when we are contacted by these folks and we don't have the resources that they're looking for, and there aren't those resources anywhere else in the state, we make note of it. And all of those things that come up as we have that ongoing list of what's needed, that's always in the back of our mind of what we could provide in the future, what grants we could pursue in the future, what programs we could establish to fill those gaps.
Are you in touch with similar groups like yours, nonprofits, organizations throughout the country? And they with you?
Around the country, if we're looking at the entire United States, we have some neighboring states like California that have 8 deaf centers that provide services to deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals in the community. Washington has their own center as well. And many other states do have something similar to what we're providing here. And when I've contacted other executive directors to share information and resources, the common thread is that there's just never enough in terms of resources. We're all facing systemic barriers all the time, and that's a common experience that we face every day. So the one thing about our employment and independent living services is that we have a really phenomenal way that we work with individuals who are deaf and identify as having an intellectual or developmental disability. And that model that we have here is something that many other states are looking at to learn more about and to be able to replicate in their state, because they are really impressed with what we're doing here, and they want to, re-implement that work in their state for what we're doing on these kits and services that we're providing. So we're hoping to provide kits to those states early next year.
Well, thank you for that. That's encouraging. What other services do you offer? You list so many on your website, bridgesoregon.org, but what are your services?
Yeah, so we offer a sign language assessment. We have the domestic and sexual violence services and training opportunities. There's A5 interpreting, the communication facilitation program for individuals who are deaf-blind who need access to information through touch while on the phone. The employment and independent living services. And maybe one or two other programs that are not coming to mind right now. But yeah, we have added programs and services, and then also had to reduce our programming and services at times. We have 3 separate grants. One I've submitted for, and 2 that I'm still working on. And if I am awarded those grants, those will allow us to have 3 new lines of services.
You are the founder of Bridges Oregon. Tell us a little more about yourself. How did you come to that point in your life where you said, we need to have an organization that helps? You are deaf.
Yes. I was born deaf. I have Pendred syndrome. And that is one of over 200 deaf genes that have been identified by now. So I'm the only deaf person in my entire family, and I don't know how I ended up with this gene, but I do love this gene very much. It's a constant blessing. And I grew up in California. I went to college to pursue a higher education. I did get my master's degree. And then when my mother had several health instances that occurred, she asked me to move here to Oregon. So I came here. She came to live with me. I didn't go to live with her. But she had early stage dementia and does right now. So we live together with my husband, and we are making it work. But that's what brought me to Oregon, and then I quickly realized that Oregon is one of 12 states in this country that has no service center for deaf and hard of hearing folks. So as I looked around and tried to figure out who was doing anything about it and who was going to do the work to establish something like that, I realized that I was going to be the one who had to take that on. So I delved into it, and there was a lot of trial and error in that process, but I'm constantly learning, and my end goal is to ensure that those resources and services are available to community members who need it.
Amazing. Right person in the right place at the right time. Bridges, Oregon. Building bridges. That's a very interesting way of thinking about how to solve this problem, building bridges.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, it's ongoing work to build bridges everywhere. And the word bridges came to mind because Oregon has a lot of bridges, first of all. And secondly, for information to get across, you need a bridge. So it's a way for the deaf and hard of hearing community to receive the information, support, and services that they need. And this is a population that's really invisible. A lot of times people do not really stop and take a step back and think about what populations might need, what services they might need. And when they think about disability, they often think of, a number of other disabilities. And when you add in deaf and hard of hearing folks, as you're kind of listing out those disability communities, a lot of times the focus and the priority goes to those who are perceived as having the highest need. So when it comes to our community, people just aren't really aware of us. And the statistics show that individuals with disabilities represent about 8 to 10% of Oregonians. And that's looking at all disabilities. But if you specifically look at the deaf and hard of hearing community, there's about 10 to 15% of the population that has that. So altogether, that's 24% of folks in the state who are living with some kind of disability. And yet, that population with hearing loss actually represents a larger percentage of the population than folks with other disabilities.
How did your parents learn that you had a hearing issue? And how did they handle that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm the only deaf child in my entire family, going back generations, an extended family. And I have looked back into my genealogy, and I have not found any evidence of any other deaf person at this point. So, the story that I heard from my family is that one day we went on an outing to the lake, and I just started walking into the water, and my family members tried to call me to stop me from going into the water, and I just kept walking straight into the water. So of course, my family members were scared and terrified. They ran and pulled me out of the water, and they said, "Hey, didn't you hear me calling you?" And that was when they started to suspect something. And they were like, okay, let's maybe get this checked. This was back in the early 1970s. So they did some testing, and a lot of doctors kind of denied that there was anything going on, and then they finally found a doctor who confirmed that I was deaf. So my parents had some conversations about what would be the best way to raise me, whether to use sign language or something else, and sign language was the choice. So my parents did divorce when I was 4, and I lived with my mom full-time, and she was the only one who learned sign language. My father did not.
That was an enormous change in your life, the sign language and the family issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very moving story. I'm sorry that it happened, but the sign language was your bridge, was it?
Yes. Yeah, I have gone through hearing and speech training, but it was not a good fit for me. There are many people out there who want to learn sign language, but it's just not a good fit for them either. just in terms of learning language. So for me, learning sign language was the best fit for me, and I became a native user of that language and have used it ever since, and I use it every day with all of the conversations that I have with anyone I meet.
And graduated from college, master's degree.
Yes. Yeah.
This is wonderful. I just keep thinking, the need is so great, too many barriers on your website. It says, you know, we need bridges, more bridges, and there's so many barriers. And give me an idea of, if it was an ideal world, which it isn't, what would you like at least to see as your legacy?
Yeah. Well, the power of money is what allows us to afford and be able to provide services. So donations would be wonderful for us to be able to have that additional financial support that would help us cover some of our overhead costs that are not able to be covered by certain grants. Because each grant has its own rules and expectations about how you're using those funds. So the donations are really what allows us to cover those additional costs. For instance, we're not allowed to use grant money to give survivors coins for laundry, for instance, because there's no way to prove that in an audit that those expenses were used for the grant in the ways that the grant allows us to use funds. There's no receipt to prove that that cost was incurred. So those additional funds from donations allow us to do things like that. And there's more examples of that as well. We also need to hire grant writers to help us apply for more grants. I do some of that myself. And sometimes there are specific grants that are very complex and overwhelming and just very challenging to put together proposals for. So we really need to have professionals to support the work that I'm doing to put forth those proposals and allow us to get the funds to continue our work and expand our programs. And we did do a community-based needs assessment back in 2015, 2016, and that information just showed that there were so many needs, and we can do so little of it right now, and we want to do so much more. We also want to give employment opportunities to deaf and hard of hearing folks to be able to work with us, because the employment opportunities for deaf and hard of hearing folks is oftentimes that when they go to apply for a job, they have a much more difficult time actually being hired, because a lot of employers feel like they don't know how to work with that person. They don't know how to provide the training and the resources or give them the talking points that are essential in that workplace. Yeah. And they just don't know how to navigate it. There was a conference I went to not long ago, and I gave a presentation. And one person from the audience who was a human resources specialist came up to me and made a bit of a confession to me. She said that she had gotten a resume of a candidate who was applying for a position, and when she saw that they were deaf, she didn't know what to do. She didn't know where to find the resources to accommodate that, and she tossed that application. And that is a common experience for a lot of us. So one thing that I want to do is provide a space to provide employment for my community.
How can people get in touch to make a donation or to learn more about your services?
Well, they can visit our website, bridgesoregon.org, or they can email info@bridges.org.
Chad, this has been an amazing story and a revelation in many ways about these worlds can be allowed to and encouraged to communicate. Those who can't hear or see, and those who would be more than happy to establish a landline, a way to communicate, and maybe get some opportunities going for them, and a more normal life, more integrated into the larger world.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for being my guest today on Insight. I want to have you back, keeping up with you.
I will, yeah.
And your interpreters, absolutely top. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing them along.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today on Insight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.